What's up, fam? Extraordinary Life with Elijah. And today, the Salvadoran people, an entire people group, are my extra, and I am the ordinary. Here, a number of years ago, back in 2012, my wife and I went and spent close to 2 years in El Salvador. And it was such a beautiful experience. I don't know how to speak worth to an entire people other than to speak to the specific people, the individual people that I engaged who were Salvadoran, that had such a marked stamp upon my life and the transformation of my heart and mind in Christ. Coming and hanging out with you guys in El Salvador was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. That I came to help, come to throw my shoulder to the wheel of the kingdom advance in your country, but left with such an awareness that I was the one helped. That I was the one who had been ministered to, and in leaving, felt like I had received more than I had given. When I went to El Salvador, it was a time period in my life that was very difficult. I had all kinds of questions and hurts and just different life experiences that left me in a really rugged place. And landing in El Salvador wasn't really something that I had dreamed of. It was flowing out of vision from my wife, that my wife wanted to do foreign ministry. And as us being a married couple in covenant relationship, if my wife was called, I had vision for that. That was part of my vision and calling as well. And so I went to El Salvador, not so much out of a sense of personal vision, but one of just pursuing things in the Lord with my wife. And getting there was very difficult, just in the aspect of my heart was for ministry in the United States. And so I was wrestling with, what does that look like? How do you minister? What is God doing in the church? Coupled with those thoughts and all that mess, that I landed in El Salvador. And there was the mess created in me of my ethnocentric thinking and my cultural assumptions that just got challenged to the max, specifically within the area of poverty and prosperity. It's so juxtaposed in the country of El Salvador that on one side of a street will be a massive mall with marble pillars that are 40 feet tall and helicopter landing spots. And on the very other side of the road, then there's villages of people living in bamboo pole huts with blue tarps pulled over the top and corrugated steel to help shed a little bit of the rain. The juxtaposition of extreme poverty next to extreme prosperity creates such a mess to deal with. That in coming out of the United States, with always having grown up in affluence, coupled with a heavy dose of an Americanized gospel, that the American dream is also the crux of the gospel, it created a very large mess in my heart and mind as I tried to deal with, what is poverty? What is prosperity? What is God's heart in them? Being there and being broken by the reality was such a wonderful gift to me. Out of that experience, what I came to realize out of that time is that God doesn't care about poverty or prosperity except in as much as they help refine our hearts and minds to receive more of Him. In the United States, we have extremes on both sides. That there's those who say that it's a prosperity gospel, that God wants us to be prosperous in all things, and that if you're poor or sick, that there's something wrong with you. You must be in sin or unbelief. And then on the other side, you have those who are promote a poverty gospel, that being poor and lowly is to be preferred and is more spiritual than having money. That if you have money, then you must be in sin and unbelief, because if you believe God, you'd be poor and have nothing. Both are a deception. Neither lead to the heart of God in and of themselves. And I think it's often our hearts that lust and long for control, that seeks one or the other to release the tension of the extremes in order to have control through our understanding. I think that lust has led to some of the greatest heresies and errors in all of church history. One verse that I think highlights it very well, that isn't necessarily speaking about money at all, but Jonathan and his armor bearer, that Jonathan sees this overwhelming force of people, and the people of Israel don't have swords. Only Jonathan and Saul have swords. There's only 2 swords in all of Israel. That is a poverty. That is a lack of weaponry, just so you know. And there's a prosperity of numerous enemies, more than that you could count. And people were all afraid. But Jonathan, in a moment of inspiration, understanding the person of God, says to his armor bearer, "Is the Lord able to save by many and not by few?" Many would obviously be prosperity, few would be poverty. And Jonathan looked at it and said, "Is the Lord able to save by many and not by few?" His point was that God is able to work within any circumstance that has the end result in his heart and mind that he desires. Out of that context, obviously, that it's a matter of trusting in who God is. So the principle to pull out of understanding wealth and poverty and prosperity within the heart of God is that the amount of money that becomes problematic is that amount which inspires a lack of trust in you in the heart of God. I think the beautiful aspect of that is then that it completely silences the debate, the yammering, the back and forth arguments of this is too much money and that's too much money, and no one should be a billionaire in the world ever. If you have $168 billion, you are evil. It's in the conversations of the world today, and lots of Christians are jumping into that argument. It completely strips the teeth out of the argument of whether or not you should be prosperous and have a lot of money, or be in abject poverty and have no money. Here is the key for you moving forward. You here on the other side of this screen, this is for you. Listen with a rake, not with a shovel. Pull the truth to yourself and ask God how he wants you to apply it. Don't dip in your shovel and throw it on your neighbor. Here's the question. What is the amount of resources, the amount of strength, the amount of positioning, the amount of people, the amount of political or religious power, the amount of whatever it is that you look to as a resource to move forward with what God has given you to do? What is the amount of that resource that would cause you to have a lack of trust in God and instead trust in that resource's value? Now here is the tricky part. Here's the part that will set you free. There are some people whose trust is destroyed by having too much money. Let's say they have a poverty mindset and they trust in riches. And so for them to have $100 million would present a huge stumbling block for them, for they would no longer trust in God. They would no longer have a relational journey of trust with their Father because they would be trusting in their money. They'd be looking to it, no longer looking to the Father's heart and trusting in Him. And for them, prosperity strikes at their trust with the Father. Here comes the other side. There are those who, if they had not 2 pennies to rub together, and they lived in a jungle with banana peels for shoes and ate worms and slugs and slept under a rock, that their poverty would indeed be an idol that would strike at their trust in God. Oh, Jesus is so brilliant. I love his ways. He's such a sneaky brother. Oh my goodness. You see, there are some people who should not be poor. They should have $100 million. The reason is that out of their mindset, their mind of flesh and their heart that is being refined into our fathers to be able to represent him as he is, for them to have $10,000, $100 in hand would cause them so much anxiety. Naturally, so much distress, such a sense of, God, if you do not empower me by your grace, I will lose my mind. I cannot hold this $100 in my hand. I am so vexed in my soul. I don't know how to handle this resource. That having 10,000, 100,000, 100 million, $100 billion would drive them into such a place of firm reliance and trust in God, to exist in that place of grace, that it would be the perfect amount of money for them to hold. Likewise, there are other people who, having zero, nothing, not 2 pennies to rub together, being bankrupt and having creditors coming to foreclose on your house, that is the place that they need to be in a place to be refined and to be empowered to a place of trust with our Father. The wisdom of the Spirit is that there are people who are in disobedience to God by divesting themselves of wealth to be in a place of poverty. Poverty is their comfortable spot. Poverty is their place of fleshly rule where they feel comfortable, where they've divested themselves of wealth and are trusting in poverty to walk in righteousness. On the flip side, there's lots of wealthy people who should divest themselves of wealth, that they've fought against God's refining process of poverty and have surrounded themselves with wealth ill-gotten by their own hand, and prosperity for them is indeed a trap, as distracting them from trust in God.
Really quick. Kai keeps touching me. I keep telling her no and talking to her. And she keeps doing it.
Well, girly girls, did Daddy connect with you this morning about how to engage and how to solve your problem? Can you engage that well and come to a conclusion? Okay, fathering is a non-stop job. No thanks, sissy. So there are those who should not be in poverty. Poverty becomes their crutch that strikes at their trust with God. They should have $1 million plus, or whatever amount God knows that is going to be the perfect amount to drive them into a place of trust with him, due to having a prosperous bank account, a prosperous position of leadership, a prosperous place of business, a prosperous area that drives them into a place of trust. Vice versa, there's those who are naturally wealthy that should be in a place of poverty where they would be driven into a heart of trust as well. The beautiful reliance is, though, that our Father in heaven knows the exact amount, the perfect amount of resources in the continuum of absolute nothing to absolute everything that will spin us up into the maturity of his heart, the absolute quickest. My encouragement to you in the consideration of resources and the realities of extremes of poverty and prosperity, absolute and relative in those contexts, my invitation to you would be to ask him for a spirit of revelation and of understanding, to know his heart and mind on those subjects, and to ask him for the solutions in the contexts where you have authority. Maybe it's in your personal life and you need heaven's solutions in your heart and mind, in your personal life, in the area of resources and understanding the economy of heaven. Maybe you have authority in your family or in your business or in your community or in nations, wherever you are positioned by our Father to have ruling authority, I ask that He would impart to you insights from heaven to speak His life-giving solutions into your context and to bring the reality of heaven to earth as it is in our home country. If you subscribe to what I'm doing, hit the button, hit it, and then get it. Hit the bell as well so you get notified with the new content. And if you love this video, you didn't just like it, hit the thumbs down button. Pray blessings on your day. I love you guys lots, and I'll see you in the next video.